there was 3 in each engine room on one watch. There was a senior motor machinist over me. I was a 3rd grade motor machinist. And then we had an electrician on the upper level. And in our engine room we had 2 V16 engines for propulsion on the ship, and there was 2 more V16s in the after engine room. And we also had an 8-cylinder diesel for light and power in our engine room. And it's funny now, but the 2 guys that I stood watch with, they had a tendency to get seasick very, very easily. So the electrician, he was the first one. He would sit on top and he'd put a bucket between his legs, and then if it got a little rougher, that bucket would get away from him, and there was about a lip like that on the upper deck. Hit that bucket, that would come down. My buddy see that, he was done. And so I was running that engine room by myself, and you had to take the compression and temperature of each cylinder on them 216 diesels every hour, plus the 8, and keep everything else going. And then they had what they call a hear. You couldn't hear yourself think, but you get in there and you're supposed to hold your ears shut and supposed to get your orders. And that always worried me that I would get something screwed up, because it was really hard to understand them down there. But we did all right. We stood watch, 2 4-hour watches a day, 4 hours on and 8 hours off. And sometimes you had GQ, then you would stay on regardless if it was 8 hours or 10 hours. And sometimes you got pretty hungry because it did last that long. They had these wolf packs out in the Atlantic, and those old German commanders were pretty sharp. They would sit in below the water, cut everything off, and then your convoys would come over, and then they would come up and they'd loosen some torpedoes. They wouldn't care what, they had to hit something, because the ships would zigzag so many minutes in one direction and so many minutes in the opposite direction. And we were the flagship. We had what they call pivot control. We were out in front of them and supposed to pick these guys up. But if they're sitting, they got everything turned off. You don't pick anything up. But they sank quite a few ships like that. And then when they would get done, they would just do the same thing, shut everything off and just drop down. Well, we'd pick them up once in a while. There's a few of them sitting out in the Atlantic didn't make it. They fired what they call 13 depth charge patterns. And if you spot it, if they pick one up on sonar, it wasn't just one ship would shoot them 13 charges at them. The next one would come by in a different direction and shoot. So finally we got credit, I think, for 1.5. We should have had 2, but it didn't. And you never know how many other ones you heard or anything. But the idea is they left you alone after that for a little while. But that was it was pretty good duty. I loved it. I never missed a meal. I never got sick a day in my life. And